The bolt round took Brother Ezekiel Crane through the throat at 17 minutes past the hour, and I watched him fall still praying to something that would not answer. His lips moved around the blood. I could read the words even as the life bled out through the ceramite seal, "Golden Father, receive your son," and I felt nothing. That was the first moment I understood something fundamental had broken inside me, because I had spoken those same words over 900 dying brothers across 4 centuries of service, and always before there had been warmth. Connection. The sense that our Father's Spirit moved through me to ease their passage. Ezekiel died with his hand reaching toward the ashen sky of Meridian's fall, fingers grasping at clouds that would give him nothing, and when I knelt to close his eyes, my gauntlet felt only meat, cooling meat in a ceramic shell. The prayer I spoke over his body came out in the correct cadence with the correct words, and they meant absolutely nothing. We had been killing heretics for 11 days on that burning world. The enemy was a cult of machine worshippers who had rejected both the Omnissiah and the Master of Mankind in favor of some hybrid doctrine that made no theological sense. They prayed to engines while defacing Aquilas, sang hymns to turbines while burning imperial saints. I had led the spiritual purification of 6 such cults across my centuries of service. The formula was simple: destroy their false idols, execute their priests, demonstrate through overwhelming violence that their faith was weaker than ours. It had always worked before because I had always believed it. Standing over Ezekiel's body with bolt fire crackling across the Manufactorum ruins, I could not remember why I had ever thought violence proved anything about truth. Brother Sergeant Dominic Vance found me still kneeling there 20 minutes later, when the immediate firefight had moved 2 structures east. Chaplain Thorne, we need you at the forward. Position. Brothers Solomon and Reeves have cornered the cult's high fabricator. His voice carried the expectation that had always accompanied such summons, the spiritual authority of my office, the ceremonial weight of final judgments, the comfort my presence brought to warriors facing their own mortality. I looked up at him and saw the faint confusion cross his features when he registered my expression. We are made to be unreadable, we of the sanguine host. Our faces are weapons of intimidation. But Dominic had served beside me for 80 years, and he knew something was wrong. How many did we lose taking this position, I asked. 7 brothers. Ezekiel, Marcus IV, Theron, Cassius, the twins from 5th Squad, and Initiate Brennan. Acceptable losses given the tactical value of acceptable. The word tasted like reactor coolant. 7 of our father's sons, acceptable. Dominic's confusion deepened into concern. Chaplain, the enemy is retreating toward their central temple. Lord Commander Kane has ordered immediate pursuit. Your presence? My presence. I rose. My armor's servo motors whined with the movement, and I remember thinking how mechanical it sounded, how unlike prayer. Yes, the men need their chaplain. We advanced through the shattered industrial district toward the cult's temple complex, and I performed my function. I recited the litanies of hate as we crossed killing grounds carpeted with our enemies' dead. I invoked our Father's name at each intersection where brothers fell to hidden gun positions. I anointed the wounded with sacred oils that smelled of nothing and meant nothing and did nothing except remind them of rituals learned in childhood before they were transformed into weapons. Dominic watched me with growing unease. I could feel his attention like heat on the back of my neck, but I could not bring myself to perform the enthusiasm that would reassure him. The words came out flat. The gestures felt hollow. The cult's high fabricator was a withered thing of perhaps 60 standard years, more metal than meat. His skull opened and rebuilt to accommodate processing cores that sparked and sputtered as Solomon held him pinned against a half-melted cogitator bank. He was laughing when I entered the chamber. That thin, mechanical laugh of a man who had moved beyond fear into something like transcendence. The angel's priest, he wheezed through a voxcaster mounted in his throat. Come to speak your hollow words over my corpse. Do you even believe them anymore, Carrion Crow? Can you feel him listening? Your dead father. Solomon struck him across the face. The blow should have killed an unaugmented human, but the fabricator's skull reinforcement held. He kept laughing. I have seen your chapter's records, priest. stolen data from your own archive ships, centuries of ritual and repetition, and what has it brought you? Your father is still dead. Your curse still devours you from within. Every generation more of your brothers fall to the red madness, and no amount of prayer brings them back. Silence him, I said. Reeves drove a combat knife through the fabricator's voxcaster. The laughing stopped, but his eyes remained fixed on mine. Knowing eyes, eyes that had seen something in me I had not meant to reveal, and when I performed the execution rite, speaking the words of condemnation over his heresy, I felt his final gaze burning through my retinal display. He died still watching, still knowing. We burned the temple, we burned the bodies, we burned everything the cult had built across 3 generations of secret worship, and Lord Commander Kane declared the campaign a success at evening vespers. I led those vespers as I had led thousands before. The brothers knelt in the firelight of their enemy's faith reduced to ash, and they repeated the responses I fed them, and I felt the disconnect growing wider with every syllable. Our Father who art eternal, thy blood flows through us. In thy name we conquer. In thy sacrifice we find purpose. The sacrifice. 400 centuries ago, the being we called Father had died screaming on a traitor's blade. He had died because another being, his brother in the ancient wars, had succumbed to corruption and turned against everything they had built together. There was no grand cosmic meaning in it, no divine plan fulfilled. One transhuman had killed another in a war that had already killed billions, and we, the descendants of the murdered one, had been telling ourselves ever since that his death meant something, that his blood carried power, that his suffering had sanctified us. I had believed it completely for 372 years. I had killed in its name, died twice. The apothecaries brought me back, because meat can be resurrected even when faith cannot, and made other men believe through the force of my conviction. Now I stood in the ashes of a heretic's temple, and understood that the high fabricator's faith and my faith were exactly equal in their truth value. 0. Both of us worshipping projections of our own psychological needs, both of us lying to ourselves because the alternative was unbearable. The campaign continued. We moved from Meridian's Fall to the fortress moon of Kessler's Hope, where a different heresy required a different purification. I performed my duties. I spoke the words, made the gestures, comforted the dying with promises I no longer believed. The brothers did not notice. They were too busy fighting, too focused on their own survival, too conditioned to accept their chaplain's guidance without question. But Dominic noticed. He began watching me during ceremonies. I caught him reviewing recordings of my sermons, comparing them to archived examples from years past, looking for evidence of something he could name, something he could report to the Lord Commander as a problem requiring solution. On the 7th day of the Kessler campaign, Brother Solomon came to me in my quarters with blood still wet on his gauntlets and doubt bleeding through his conditioning. He had been forced to execute one of our newly fallen, Brother Thaddeus Gray, who had succumbed to the red madness during an assault on the enemy's tertiary bunker, the madness that haunted our bloodline, the genetic curse our father had passed to us, along with his transhuman gifts. When it took a brother, he relived our father's death. He became, for those final hours or days, a living echo of the Primarch's last moments, screaming the same words, fighting the same phantom enemies, dying the same death over and over until his heart finally gave out, or a merciful brother ended it. He said something, Solomon told me. His voice was steady. We are trained for steadiness. But his eyes carried a weight I recognized. Before I granted him peace. Thaddeus said something I have not heard in any of the recorded cases. I should have felt concern. Alarm. The protective urgency of a spiritual guide whose flock faced theological danger. I felt only a dull curiosity, like watching a fire burn from a great distance. What did he say? Solomon's jaw tightened. He said, Father saw it at the end. Father knew there was nothing waiting. We die and there is only the dark, and everything we built was just noise before the silence. Then he laughed, chaplain, the same laugh as when the madness shows them the death vision, but wrong, empty. The silence between us stretched. I should have offered comfort, scriptural reassurance, the standard response to such crisis. The madness corrupts perception, the dying see shadows that are not truth. Our Father's sacrifice echoes through time to shield us from oblivion. I had spoken those words hundreds of times to brothers disturbed by their fallen comrades' final utterances. "Thank you for reporting this," I heard myself say. "I will include it in my spiritual assessment of the campaign. The enemy's heretical beliefs may be causing resonance disturbances in our brothers' vision states. I will develop appropriate counter-liturgies." Solomon searched my face. He was looking for the certainty that had always been there, the absolute conviction that made my words into truth simply because I spoke them. "Chaplain, have you heard such things before? From the fallen?" "Never. In 372 years, I had never heard a brother in the death madness speak of nothingness. They screamed of betrayal, of burning ships and dying worlds, of the traitor's blade and our Father's agony. They called out names that no longer existed, fought battles that had ended before human civilization reached the stars. But they had never spoken of cosmic emptiness, of meaninglessness, of silence. Rest, Brother Solomon. Pray the litany of warding before you sleep. I will address this matter." He left. I did not pray the counter-liturgies I had promised. Instead, I accessed our chapter's archived records, the sealed files that only chaplains and chapter command could view, and I began searching for other instances of such death utterances, brothers who had spoken of emptiness, of darkness, of the Father's despair rather than his defiance. There were more than I expected, scattered across centuries, brief notations in chaplains' logs, usually dismissed as corruption artifacts or enemy influence. But they formed a pattern. As the millennia passed, as more and more brothers succumbed to the genetic madness, the content of their death visions was changing. Early records showed brothers reliving the Primarch's final battle with pure theatrical heroism, going to death assured of cosmic significance. Recent records increasingly showed doubt, fear, the creeping suspicion that the sacrifice had purchased nothing, that the Father had died screaming into a void that did not care. I found a personal journal hidden in the archives under encryption that my authorization codes should not have been able to break, yet they did, almost as if the previous author had wanted someone to find it eventually. Chaplain Marcus Kane, 300 years dead. His words swam up from the data slate like accusations. "I have served the chapter for 2 centuries. I have guided 4,000 brothers through death or despair. I have spoken the words of our Father's legacy until they became more familiar than my own heartbeat, and I no longer believe any of it. The Primarch's death was not a sacred sacrifice, it was a murder. A strong being killed by a stronger one in a war that had no righteous side. We inherited his curse because genetics do not care about meaning. We fall to the red madness because our flesh is flawed, not because we are being tested. Every brother I have comforted with promises of reunion beyond death, every heretic I have condemned as spiritually void, I have been lying. We are all equal in our annihilation. The only difference between us and the enemy is the shape of our delusions." He had written those words and then continued serving for another 50 years, had continued performing the ceremonies, speaking the sermons, guiding the dying into darkness while telling them it was light, had died in combat according to the official records, leading a spiritual assault against a daemon incursion, died heroically, died faithful, but he had not been faithful. He had known, as I now knew, that there was nothing behind the rituals, and he had chosen to continue anyway. I found his final entry dated 3 days before his death. I do not know how to give my brothers the truth. They need the lie to function. Our chapter survives because warriors believe their deaths mean something. If I tell them what I have learned, that the galaxy is cold mouth and we are meat that learn to scream, they will fall apart, not all at once, but the fractures will spread. Brother will look at brother and see only another doomed animal pretending to be part of something larger. The curse will take them faster because there will be no spiritual resistance, no faith armor to slow the madness. I have run the projections. Within 2 centuries we would cease to exist as a functioning chapter. So I will die with the lie on my lips. I will enter whatever void awaits me as a hypocrite, rather than a destroyer. May whoever finds these records understand, I did not keep faith with truth, I kept faith with survival. Perhaps that is its own form of sacred duty. Perhaps it is simply cowardice. I will never know. I read those words in the artificial midnight of my quarters, surrounded by the trophies and relics of my centuries of service, and I understood that I was living Chaplain Kane's crisis 300 years later. The same discovery, the same impossible choice, the same crushing weight of responsibility for brothers who needed to believe in something, even if that something was fabrication. Lord Commander Kane summoned me the next morning. His personal quarters occupied the upper spire of our strike cruiser, and climbing to them always felt like ascending toward judgment. Kane had led our chapter for 112 years. He had known Kane, had served under him as a young battle brother, had absorbed whatever faith Kane projected during those final hypocritical decades. He was watching me with eyes that had seen too many things to be deceived by performance. Chaplain Thorne, Brother Sergeant Dominic has expressed concerns about your spiritual state. He believes you are experiencing difficulties. I stood at attention. The pose felt meaningless, meat positioning itself according to programmed responses. Lord Commander, I am functional. My duties continue to be performed according to standard. According to standard. Kane's scarred face showed nothing. Yes, that is what concerns me. Your sermons have always been passionate. Your faith was infectious. Brothers sought you out because being near you made them feel closer to our Father. Dominic tells me you have become mechanical. Correct, but empty. As if you are reading from a script you no longer understand. I should have lied. That was Kane's solution, the expedient hypocrisy, the performance that preserved the chapter's stability. But Kane's eyes held mine, and I felt something break loose inside my chest. The weight of carrying the knowledge alone, even for these few days, had become unbearable. Lord Commander, I have been reading the sealed chaplaincy archives, the personal journals of those who served before me. Kane's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Have you, Chaplain Kane, his final records, his spiritual crisis? Ah. Kane turned away, moving toward the observation port that dominated his quarter's far wall. Stars burned beyond the transparent steel, cold and ancient and absolutely unconcerned with anything happening aboard our vessel. I wondered if you would find those. Each chaplain does eventually. Kane's journals are something of a rite of passage for our spiritual leaders. Intentionally so. I did not understand. The confusion must have shown on my face, because Kane's scarred mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. You believe you have discovered a terrible secret, that our faith is built on sand, that our father's sacrifice meant nothing, that we have been lying to ourselves and each other for millennia. This is not a discovery, Marcus. It is a test. I do not. Every chaplain reaches this point. The ones who lack the capacity for genuine spiritual depth never do. They simply believe without questioning, and their faith is authentic but shallow. The ones with real insight, real capacity to understand the cosmos, eventually see through the comforting narratives. They find Kane's journals because those journals are left to be found. They face the choice, continue the lie for pragmatic reasons, or find something deeper. My thoughts were fragmenting, reforming, fragmenting again. Something deeper? Lord Commander, if the faith is false, the faith is not false. It is incomplete. Kane turned back to face me. In the starlight, his features looked ancient, not the mere 112 years of his command, but something far older, as if all the Lord Commanders who had come before him were looking through his eyes. Our father died. That is fact. His sacrifice prevented a greater catastrophe. The traitor would have struck at the master of mankind directly had our father not intercepted him. That is also fact. What we have built in the millennia since, the rituals, the liturgies, the promises of reunion and cosmic significance, those are scaffolding, useful scaffolding. They allow younger brothers to access the spiritual strength they need before they are capable of understanding its true source. Its true source? Choice, Marcus. We are not sacred because a godlike being bled for us 10,000 years ago. We are sacred because we choose to be. Every brother who takes the field knowing he might die, knowing his body might betray him to the red madness, knowing the universe is vast and cold and indifferent, every such brother makes the same choice our Father made. To stand anyway, to fight anyway, to protect humanity anyway. Not because a cosmic reward awaits, but because the act itself is what matters. The choice creates the meaning. We do not inherit our Father's sanctity through blood ritual, we earn it through action. I wanted to believe him. The framework he offered was elegant, a theology of existential commitment rather than supernatural faith. Choose to matter by choosing to act as if you matter. Create meaning through dedication even in a meaningless universe. It was almost convincing. And the fallen? The brothers who succumb to the madness and speak of nothingness, of the Father's final despair? Cain's expression hardened. Yes, that is the other piece of this, the part Cain understood but could not accept. Our genetic curse is evolving, each generation carries a slightly different expression of the Primarch's final experiences. What was once pure death echo, the heroic reliving of his last battle, is becoming something else. The curse is no longer just showing our brothers how he died. It is showing them what he understood in those final moments. The cold crept deeper into my chest, and what did he understand? That there was no cosmic victory waiting on the other side, that his sacrifice would slow the enemy, would buy time for humanity to survive, but would not redeem or sanctify anything. He died knowing that he was meat that had learned to love, and that the love would outlast him only if other meat chose to carry it forward. He died understanding that meaning is not discovered. It is created, from nothing, by beings who refuse to accept meaninglessness. That is terrifying. Yes, and it is also liberating for those strong enough to bear it. The brothers who cannot, those who need the comforting lie of cosmic certainty, we give them the rituals, the litanies, the promises of reunion. It is not false mercy, it is appropriate medicine. But you, Marcus, you have the capacity to see clearly. The question is whether you can serve our brothers with clear eyes. The campaign on Kessler's Hope ended 6 days later. We had purged the heresy, established the new imperial governor, blessed memorial stones for our fallen. Standard operations. 34 brothers dead across both campaigns, 34 funerals performed according to the rites, with words I now understood differently. The promises of peace beyond the darkness, useful fictions for warriors who could not bear the truth, the invocations of our Father's eternal embrace, metaphors for a love that had ended 10 millennia ago but whose pattern we could choose to replicate through our own actions. I was not healed. The faith I had possessed before, the simple burning certainty that every word I spoke connected to cosmic truth, that faith was dead and would not return. But Cain had given me something else, a framework, a way to continue serving without being a complete hypocrite. The brothers needed their chaplain, and their chaplain needed a reason to stand before them without shattering into fragments. Choice as sacrament, action as prayer, meaning created rather than received. It was thin comfort in the void between stars. Brother Solomon came to me again during the transit to our next deployment. He had been struggling since Thaddeus Gray's death. I could see it in the careful way he moved, the slight hesitation before he spoke the responses during Vespers. The doubt was spreading through him, and I recognized it because I had watched it spread through myself. Chaplain, I have been praying as you instructed, the litany of warding, but... He trailed off. His hands, gene-bulked to crush ceramite, were trembling slightly. I cannot stop hearing what Thaddeus said, the darkness, the silence, Father knowing there was nothing waiting. I should have given him the comforting lie, the ritual reassurance that Cain had described, the medicine for warriors who could not bear clear sight. But Solomon was watching me with such desperate hunger for truth, and I found I could not make the words come out with the old conviction. The lie would not form. Solomon, what Thaddeus said was part of what our curse shows us. As we age, as the genetic patterns express more fully, we see more of what our Father experienced in his final moments. Then it is true? The emptiness? I do not know what our father saw in his last seconds. None of us do, not really. The curse gives us fragments, interpretations, shadows of shadows. I was improvising now, finding words I did not know I had. But I know this, our father chose to die fighting. He could have fled. He could have surrendered. He saw whatever void lay beyond the end, and he faced it anyway. That is what the curse does not show us clearly. Not the emptiness itself, but the act of confronting it, of refusing to be, diminished by it. Solomon's trembling had not stopped. Chaplain, I need to know that it means something, my service, the brothers I have killed beside, the enemies I have struck down. If it is all just noise before silence, then we are beings who choose to make noise, who choose to fill the silence with something rather than nothing. The words came from somewhere I did not fully understand, perhaps from Cain's framework, perhaps from some deeper source I had not known I possessed. Our father did not die for a cosmic reward. He died because he loved humanity enough to buy it time. We inherit that love through our actions, Solomon. Every time we stand between the innocent and the darkness, we are choosing to carry his meaning forward, not because the universe cares, it does not, but because we care. That is enough. It has to be enough. I do not know if he believed me. I do not know if I believed myself. But his trembling eased, and when he left my quarters, he walked with something closer to his old certainty. The lie that is not quite a lie. The truth that requires faith to complete. I was learning to speak in that register, in the space between conviction and despair. Dominic found me in the observation deck 3 nights later, staring at the warp transition effects that rippled across our vessel's hull. The Imperium, that hellscape of pure thought and emotion that we traversed between stars, was particularly turbulent on this passage. Colors that did not exist in the material universe bled through our reality shields, and shapes moved in the chaos that suggested awareness, malice, hunger. You have changed, he said, not accusation, observation. Since Ezekiel's death, something happened to you on that burning world. I considered lying. It would have been easier. Dominic was not like Solomon. He did not need truth to function. He needed authority, hierarchy, the comfort of knowing that those above him in the spiritual chain possessed certainty he could rely on. Giving him doubt would be a cruelty, but I was tired of lying, tired of the weight of performance. I lost my faith, Dominic, or rather, I lost the faith I thought I had. The simple faith, the easy answers. He was silent for a long moment. The warp colors played across his features, painting him in shades of impossible violet and screaming orange. And what do you have now? I am not sure yet. Something harder. Something that has to be chosen rather than inherited. I turned to face him fully. I can still serve the brothers. I can still perform the ceremonies, speak the litanies, guide the dying, but it will not be the same. I will be speaking metaphors instead of literal truth, offering frameworks instead of certainties. Dominic processed this. I could see the thoughts moving behind his eyes, the tactical calculations, the threat assessments. A chaplain in crisis was a danger to chapter cohesion. A chaplain who admitted to lost faith could undermine decades of spiritual conditioning in the brothers he served. Will you tell the others? No. Cain has helped me understand that most brothers need the simpler faith. It is not weakness, it is simply different capacity. What I can bear to know, they cannot. What I must build through conscious choice, they receive through ritual and repetition. I let out a breath. I will be a hypocrite, Dominic, in a sense. Speaking words I do not believe literally while believing in their function. Is that something you can accept? I have always known there were things the chaplaincy did not share with line brothers, he said slowly. Mysteries reserved for the spiritual leaders. I assumed those mysteries were deeper truths, more profound certainties. He met my eyes. You are telling me the mystery is the opposite, that the deeper you go, the less certain you become, and that you continue anyway. Yes, that is. He stopped, tried again. That is actually more impressive, chaplain, more worthy of respect. To serve without the comfort of believing your own words, that requires greater strength than simple faith. I had not expected this response. I had prepared for accusation, disgust, the demand that I surrender my office. Instead, Dominic was looking at me with something like renewed admiration, as if my confession of doubt had paradoxically reinforced his confidence in my leadership. "You will not report this to the Lord Commander?" "Kane already knows. He knows everything that happens among his officers." Dominic's mouth quirked. "I suspect he has been waiting for you to reach this point, watching to see how you handle it. The fact that you are still standing, still serving, that tells him what he needs to know." We stood together in the warp light, watching the daemon shapes swirl beyond the hull. They could not reach us here. The Geller fields held, the navigator kept us on course, but their presence reminded me of the alternative. There were beings in this universe that fed on doubt, on despair, on the collapse of meaning. They would consume us if we let the faith fail entirely, not because faith protected us through cosmic truth, but because faith protected us through psychological cohesion, through the shared agreement to fight rather than surrender, the choice that creates the meaning, the action that generates the sanctity. I was beginning to understand what Kane had meant. Our next deployment was to a world called Salvation's Reach, a hive planet that had suffered a minor demonic incursion. The population had been spiritually compromised by prolonged exposure to warp taint, and our chapter had been requested to assist with the purification. Standard operations, except that purification on this scale meant killing millions. The tainted could not be saved, only excised. We would wade through blood for months, possibly years, and every death would be the killing of innocents who had been corrupted through no fault of their own. I led the first landing party. I spoke the words of dedication as we descended through the ash-gray clouds. I anointed the brothers' weapons with sacred oils and invoked our Father's protection over their souls. The rituals felt different now, not empty as they had during my crisis, but consciously crafted. I was choosing to perform them because performance itself was the substance. The meaning was not waiting to be received from the cosmos, it was being generated by our collective action. The corruption was worse than the briefings had suggested. The population had not merely been tainted, they had been transformed. We found civilians with extra mouths growing from their backs, speaking blasphemies in languages that predated human colonization of this sector. We found children whose eyes had been replaced with something that looked inward instead of outward, staring at visions we could not see. We found families who had been fused together at the joints, sharing circulation systems and nervous tissue, experiencing each other's terror as a collective chorus of endless screaming. I killed a woman who still wore a Medicae's robes, her hands twisted into bone blades, but her voice still pleading for help. I killed a boy of perhaps 8 standard years who tried to embrace me as I approached, his arms extending far beyond their natural length to wrap around my armor and pull us both toward a mouth that had opened in his chest. I killed and killed and killed, and each death was necessary, and none of it meant anything except what I chose to make it mean. On the 5th day, we lost Brother Casimir to the Red Madness. It happened during a purge of the 19th residential district. Casimir had been with the chapter for 93 years, a steady, reliable warrior without exceptional gifts but with absolute dedication to duty. He had never shown signs of the genetic curse's early stages, the subtle tremors and mood variations that usually presaged a full collapse. He simply screamed and dropped his weapon, and began clawing at his own face, trying to remove something only he could see. I reached him before the other brothers could react. My training took over, contain the fallen, assess the severity, determine if recovery is possible or if mercy is required. Casimir was deep in the vision. His eyes had rolled back, showing only white, and his voice was speaking in our Father's register, the low commanding tones that archives tell us the Primarch used in battle. But the words were wrong. He is coming and there is no fortress that can hold. He is coming and my sons will burn. He is coming and I have given everything for nothing, nothing. There is nothing behind the golden mask, there never was. We built our cathedrals on a corpse and called it God. I silenced him with a bolt to the brainstem, quick, clean, merciful. The body slumped, and I caught it before it hit the corrupted ground, and I held the corpse of Brother Casimir and felt the words echoing through my own thoughts. built our cathedrals on a corpse and called it God. Was that what our Father had understood at the end? Was the curse showing us that his sacrifice had been made not for humanity's protection, but in despair at its futility? The brothers were watching me, waiting for the chaplain's guidance, waiting for the words that would make this death bearable. Brother Casimir has joined our Father, I said. The formula rolled out automatically. His service is ended, but his legacy continues through us. We will honor him by completing the work he gave his life to advance. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects, they echoed. I knelt beside the body and began the last rites. The words meant nothing cosmic. They were symbols I was arranging, patterns I was creating, a small human gesture against an indifferent universe. But the brothers believed. I could feel their belief pressing against me like warmth, filling the void where my own certainty had been. They needed me to perform this ritual with conviction, and conviction, I was discovering, could be generated through act rather than inherited through truth. I chose to believe Casimir's death meant something, not because the universe confirmed it, because I refused to let it mean nothing. The campaign on Salvation's Reach lasted 9 months. We lost 41 brothers to combat and 3 more to the Red Madness. Each time a brother fell to the curse, I was there. Each time I listened to what the death visions revealed. Each time I heard fragments of our Father's final understanding, the cosmic emptiness, the futility of sacrifice, the absence of anything waiting beyond the ending. And each time I spoke the words that transformed that emptiness into something bearable. Not lies exactly. Reframings. The darkness our Father saw was real, I told the surviving brothers, but his choice to face it was realer. The void does not care about us, but we can care about each other in defiance of its indifference. Our Father did not die for a reward. He died for the same reason we fight, because someone must, and we are capable, and capability creates obligation. I was becoming a different kind of chaplain, not the burning true believer I had been before Meridian's fall, not the hollow hypocrite I had feared becoming when the doubt first struck. Something in between, something that had looked into the absence and decided to fill it with deliberately constructed meaning rather than inherited certainty. Cain summoned me when we returned to the chapter's fortress monastery. He looked tired. Even space marines can be worn down by sufficient sorrow, and the campaign had cost us dearly. But his eyes held approval when he studied my face. "You have completed the passage," he said, "from simple faith through crisis to deliberate conviction. Not every chaplain manages it. Some remain in the comfortable lie, some fall into the emptiness and cannot climb out. But you have found the third path. I am still learning what that means. Lord Commander, you will continue learning for the rest of your service. That is what makes it faith rather than certainty." He gestured toward the observation port, the same stars burning with the same ancient indifference. Our Father's final understanding was not that the universe is empty. It was that the emptiness can be filled. We choose what to put there. He chose to put love for humanity, protection for his sons, defiance against the forces that would consume everything worthwhile. That choice did not require a cosmic guarantee. It only required him. I thought of the dead, Ezekiel and Casimir and all the others, thought of the words I had spoken over their bodies, words that were neither literal truth nor simple lie, but something more complex. Performance that generated its own reality, ritual that created what it claimed to invoke. "I will continue serving," I said. "The brothers need their chaplain, they do, and now you can give them what they truly need. Not just the comforting words, but the example of a warrior who has seen the void and chosen to matter anyway." Cain stood. "You are dismissed, Chaplain Thorne. There is a new cohort of initiates arriving next month. They will need someone to teach them why we fight. I suspect you will teach them something truer than you would have before your crisis, even though you will use the same words." I returned to my duties. I led vespers and funerals and battle blessings. I trained young warriors in the spiritual disciplines and counseled older ones through their own creeping doubts. I served the chapter as I always had, but now I served with open eyes, choosing each word as an act of creation rather than repetition. The Red Madness continued to claim brothers. The death visions continued to reveal fragments of our Father's final despair, and I continued to transform those revelations into something the chapter could survive, not by denying them, that was no longer possible for me, but by contextualizing them. By teaching, slowly and carefully, a faith that could accommodate the void without being swallowed by it. There is a word for what I became. Cain used it once, during a conversation late in my 3rd century of service after the crisis. He called me a true believer in the act of believing, someone who had moved past the content of faith to grasp its function, someone who understood that the rituals and the words and the promises were tools for generating meaning rather than channels for receiving it. I killed the High Fabricator of Meridian's Fall because his heresy was indistinguishable from the truth I had discovered. That was the horror I could not face at the time, the recognition that his mockery of our faith was accurate. We had built cathedrals on a corpse. We had called our genetic donor a god. We had invented cosmic significance to make our suffering bearable. But the Fabricator was wrong about one thing. He believed that exposing the lie would destroy us. He believed that truth was incompatible with function, that seeing clearly meant falling apart. He had not considered the possibility that we might see clearly and choose to continue anyway, that the lie could be transformed into a deliberate fiction, not believed but enacted, not inherited but created. Our Father saw the void. He saw that his sacrifice would purchase nothing eternal, that the forces arrayed against humanity would continue whether he died fighting or fled to safety. And he chose to die fighting anyway, because choice is where meaning originates. Not from the cosmos, not from divine mandate, from the act itself performed by beings who refuse to accept that meaninglessness has the final word. I am a chaplain of the sanguine host. I no longer believe in the literal truth of our liturgies. I no longer expect reunion with our Father beyond death, or cosmic reward for centuries of service, or any comfort from the universe in which we fight. But I believe in my brothers. I believe in the work. We do. I believe that protecting humanity matters because we make it matter, and that our Father's legacy lives because we choose to carry it. The void is real. The emptiness our fallen brothers see in their death visions is not corruption, it is clarity, but clarity does not require surrender. We can look into the darkness and fill it with defiance. We can know that nothing waits for us and decide to be something anyway. That is the faith I have found on the other side of doubt. It is harder than the simple certainty I lost. It offers no comfort, no reassurance, no promise of meaning I did not build with my own hands. But it is mine. It is true in the only way that matters, not because the universe confirms it, but because I choose it. And when the red madness finally takes me, when the curse shows me our Father's final vision of cosmic emptiness, I will face it as he did, not with denial, not with despair, with the quiet understanding that meaning was never waiting to be discovered. It was always ours to create. The choice is the sacrament. The action is the prayer. Everything else is scaffolding, useful, necessary, but not the foundation. I serve the Emperor. I guard my brothers. I carry our Father's pattern forward into darkness, and that will have to be enough.